All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Namrata. I'm a postdoctoral scholar at the Population Aging Research Center, and thanks so much for giving me this opportunity to present this work today. So today's presentation is joint work with my colleagues at the MLSFH team, Professors Hans-Peter Kohler and Ileana Kohler, like who are the PI of the MLSFH project, Kung Huang and Lee Purcell, my in-house collaborators and our fantastic collaborators from Malawi, Kazioni Koliseva and Andrew Zulu. Um, and I'll go and get started with the presentation. So the world is rapidly aging, as we know, and with an aging population, the number of individuals living with dementia and ADRD is projected to significantly rise in the coming decades. And in this context, countries in Eastern Sub-Saharan Africa are especially vulnerable with a projected 357% increase in dementia cases by 2050, which indicates the burden of dementia will be potentially severe in low resource countries such as Malawi, which is the fourth poorest country in the world, and where nearly 70% of the population lives below the international poverty line and experiences significant lifetime adversity. Although gradual decline in cognitive ability is a natural part of the aging process, accelerated decline in cognition and cognitive abilities are potential precursors of dementia risk and ADRD, which is exactly why understanding the life course dynamics of aging related changes in cognitive function is profoundly important to guiding research on the etiology, prevention, and control of cognitive impairment and rising dementia burden in this part of the world. And this brings me to the gap. However, such evidence on understanding the dynamics of cognitive aging trajectories has been missing, especially due to the lack of longitudinal aging studies in this particular population, which in turn is limiting our knowledge of cognitive decline and potential health system responses to a rising dementia burden in this vulnerable population. And also in this regard, we do have enough evidence on heterogeneity in cognitive aging trajectories, which is mostly limited to high income countries and also like upper middle income countries. And also there is a parallel strand of age gap studies that especially measure cognition in many of which is a mix of MICs and also like South Africa and some other parts of the world. However, we don't have longitudinal cognition aging data in in Malawi so far. And also to kind of add on to our existing research, early research from rural Malawi does indicate that age-related cognitive decline accelerates with age and is already detectable in early middle ages. So our particular study basically advances this line of research by investigating longitudinal trajectories of cognition using cognitive assessments with repeated observations, which we have available from the Malawi MLSFH data set. This brings me to the three particular objectives that we try to focus. The first one being examining the diversity in cognitive aging trajectories, and we use GBTM models, and I'll get to it very shortly. For the first time in an African low-income context, using an aging cohort that has been followed up for 10 years. The second part is analyzing the variation in the pace of cognitive decline across the different cognition trajectories, and finally estimate the socio-demographic correlates of trajectory group membership to illustrate, the predictors of group membership probabilities in this population. So I'll go over this massively rich, rare data real quick. So data has been used from the mature adults cohort supplement of the Malawi longitudinal study of families and health. So the MLSFH provides a rare record of 25 years of longitudinal population cohort data in Malawi, and the mature adults cohort focuses on cognition and related health variables from the existing MLSFH cohort. So for this particular study, the analysis covers data from 2012 through 22 and spans across four different MLSFH waves because the cognition variable was first collected from 2012 onwards. And this brings me to the flow chart of sample selection. So we had around 1,320 adults that were enrolled in the baseline sample, and then we impose like age selection criteria of 45 and up through 80, and those that had a cognition score available. And this brings us to the final analytic sample of 1,214 adults. So the most important variable, which is the primary outcome of the study, is the cognition assessment score, which we just call the MCA, and it has been culturally adapted from popular instruments that like the mini mental state and the MOCA, and has been culturally adapted in the Malawian context, and it broadly covers domains like the language, orientation, attention and working memory, and executive functioning. And the socio-demographic variables that we use are like region of birth, gender, education, marital status, and wealth indicator. And each of these have been used as dummy variables. Um, and just briefly going over the descriptive characteristics of this particular analytic sample, as you can see, the total cognition score, which ranges from 0 through 30. In this particular analytic sample, the average is around 21. 43% of the population are males, roughly 30% is born in central, and around 70% comprises the northern and southern region of Malawi. 37% of the population has no schooling, and 57% has primary schooling, and a very small fraction are secondary educated and above. So almost 66% of respondents were married at the baseline year of 2012. And again, wealth indicator in this case was if the respondent's house had a metal roof, which is also like used as a wealth as a marker of socioeconomic status and wealth in this particular rural context following previous study. And in this population, around 61% of the respondents lived in a house with a metal roof. And for statistical methods, as I mentioned a little while ago, we do use group-based trajectory models. In fact, an extension of group-based trajectory models that also jointly models mortality. But again, we have theoretical and methodological reasons to use this, contrary to growth curve models as well. The reason being, this model allows us to understand population level sub-differences and also arrive at clusters of individuals that follow a similar development trajectory, and helps us understanding the heterogeneity in cognitive aging over time. And for the next part, we use fractional multinomial logic regression models to examine the association of various socio-demographic factors with the group membership probabilities. And again, just real brief, we use an extension of GBTM models that accounts for attrition, because as we know, mortality is not really random. Um, and just following some specifics, we use age was modeled as a quadratic function, and we use the sensor normal distribution to estimate trajectories for the cognition score. And this brings me to the most important part of the study, which I'd like to focus on today. The first, to get started, we do observe heterogeneity in cognitive aging trajectories. As you can see, this is the trajectory plot of rural Malawians, for which we had like, a decade of observations. And in this current sample, we do see like around 36% of respondents were in the high cognition group, 46% were in the medium, and 18% belong to the low cognition trajectory group. Just for the next part, what I try to do is arrive at the baseline characteristics of respondents by the trajectory group membership to understand how each of the socio-demographic variables are distributed across the different trajectories. So for example, as we can see, women occupy a bigger part of the low cognition group trajectory, which was not surprising. So around 83% of the sample, like women, were in the low cognition group, whereas men occupied like around 40% in the high cognition group. So similarly, even in the no schooling, those that did not have schooling, it was around 73% who belonged to the low cognition group, whereas most in the high cognition group had schooling. This exactly, brings us to the socio-demographic variations that we also see in cognition, which this particular table illustrates. To further understand for the next part, which I think is very important, I try to understand the pace at which cognitive decline varies over the life course within these within each of these trajectories. So figure 3 on the left is derived from the trajectory plot, and so is table 2, but each of these, I would say, graphics here offer a different perspective in the pace of cognitive decline. So for example, as you see on figure 3, up to age 50, the trajectories really don't diverge, right? But by age 60, we do see that each of the trajectories start diverging, which again accelerates with age. And the y-axis has been basically rescaled to calculate the relative change in cognition score compared to the compared to age 45 in each of these trajectories, which helps us understand how these groups differ within each other and also provides further insights into the heterogeneity. And table 2 on this side provides a different perspective of this early onset in cognitive decline by showing the different ages at which cognition declines 5%, 10% through 35% from their cognition levels at age 45. For example, for individuals in the low cognition trajectory, what we do see, the cognition score declines by 25% by the time the individual reaches 71. However, for the medium cognition group, this percentage decline is reached almost 6 years later at the age of 77. But what's surprising is for the high cognition group, it does not even reach 25% decline, even at the age of 80. And this exactly tells us like we do observe a heterogeneity, and one size fits all, for example, by calculating, just one mean for the entire population is not enough to understand some groups experience accelerated aging and some groups actually experience healthy cognitive aging over time. And finally, uh, I sorry, yeah, finally I report the fractional results from the regression analysis for the association of sociodemographic characteristics at baseline with the trajectory group membership probabilities, and these are like marginal means reported. Uh, sorry, my screen for some reason just blank. But anyway, so what we do observe here, um, for example, gender, schooling, wealth, and birth cohort are significant predictors of cognition membership probabilities, trajectory group membership probabilities. And for example, for women, what we do observe, like 13% of women were more likely belong to the low cognition group and 18% less likely to belong to the high cognition group. Similarly, for those that have primary schooling, they were 28% more likely to belong to the high cognition group and 17% less likely to belong to the low cognition group. And this again brings us to the importance of the socio-demographic predictors in predicting trajectory group membership probabilities. And finally, this kind of brings me to the conclusion, the key takeaways, and some of the limitations of the current study. So the most important innovation of this paper is the examination of cognitive aging trajectories. And we do find that heterogeneity exists in cognitive aging in this particular population. And this study uncovers widening gaps between those that age with resilience and those that experience accelerated cognitive decline. We also provide the first longitudinal evidence on the heterogeneity in cognitive aging in Eastern Sub-Saharan Africa, low-income country, which I think is pretty great. And we leverage the MLSFH data that actually provides a very novel longitudinal design, which also enhances the generalizability and relevance of our findings for aging population and other LIC low-income countries in sub-Saharan Africa with similar profiles. And our analysis highlight, the long arm of early life conditions and gender in determining aging trajectories and show that a non-trivial population is characterized by accelerated cognitive aging. So, as some of the first longitudinal evidence on the diversity of cognitive aging in a low income country in Eastern Sub Saharan Africa, the most important thing, the study provides a glimpse into the future burden of cognitive impairment that is projected to increase in this particular region. And finally, some of the limitations. So the study population covers only rural Malawi, which means it is not nationally representative. And we also do not provide research diagnosis of dementia, so far at least. And also for this particular study, this is more descriptive. We do not delve into the mechanisms that shape and contribute to age-related cognitive decline, which well, forms an important avenue for future research. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. So thank you for listening so much.